Over the last few months, I've been doing retrospectives on most of the Tony Hawk's games in the PS2 and PS3 era, and I thought it'd be fitting to rank the games that I did retrospectives for, and to let you know what I thought of them overall. My name's OneHip, and thanks for clicking on this video. Before we do get into it, I just want to thank you all for 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Absolutely amazing, an incredible achievement, and something I didn't think would happen for quite a while, so I really appreciate it. And if you've watched any or all of my retrospectives, thank you very much. And if you're new to this channel and haven't watched one yet, welcome. So just a few ground rules before I do get into the rankings. I'm only going to be doing rankings that I did retrospectives on, so anything before Pro Skater 3 or after Proving Ground won't be featured here. So sorry ride fans, you're not going to get a ranking. And also just another thing, this is purely my personal opinion. I know there's fans who loved Wasteland, fans of Project 8, fans of Proving Ground, fans of the Pro Skater series. So again, it's just purely my personal opinion. And also for the rankings, because there's only 7 games in here, being at the bottom of the rankings doesn't mean that the game is bad. There just might have been some things that higher ranking games had that the others didn't, or there might be some shortfalls for the lower ranked games. They didn't quite get it into the top tier. Every game that I did retrospectives on the series overall ranged from decent to excellent, so there was not a bad game in the bunch that I played. However, the only exception would be Pro Skater 5 if I did a retrospective on it. That one sucked. And it'd definitely be on the bottom because it's a really bad game. Hope you enjoy this one, and if you want to watch any or all of my Tony Hawk's retrospectives either for the first time or again, I've got a playlist in the description below, so be sure to watch them. So before I kick off this list, I want to acknowledge that I did do a retrospective on Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam, but I feel like because it's a completely different game and it was a spin-off to the original series, I feel it's a bit unfair to rank it in here. It's just basically just an arcadey downhill racer with some trick elements and some other kind of modes that was here as well. And I think a lot of fans of games that might have been lower had I ranked Downhill Jam in this one, they'd probably get pretty upset. So I don't want that to happen. And I think Downhill Jam didn't quite have the popularity as some of the other games in this list. So I'm just going to give Downhill Jam an honorable mention. It was a surprisingly fun game, especially on PS2. It did have some issues. I mean, the career mode, you couldn't continue by swapping out different characters. You had to play as one character for the whole thing, which is a bit annoying and probably very time consuming to go through each character. So that's why in my retrospective I only played as Jinx for the whole thing. Otherwise it would have taken me forever to get the gameplay footage. So yeah, honorable mention, Downhill Jam, fun game, but I won't rank it this time. At number 7, Tony Hawk's Project 8. I feel like the realistic physics were quite the departure from previous games, and playing it for the very first time for my retrospective, it was quite jarring. Some of the missions were also really hard to do. I think because it tried to be like the old arcadey style Tony Hawk's, but it had those grounded kind of physics as well, and I don't think they were quite a match with some of the goals that you needed to do. I mean, there were a few goals where it got so frustrating to the point where I just didn't even bother doing them. I just quit and just moved on to the next one, really. I was told that it could have been like an emulator issue or something like that, or the 60 FPS patch that I applied to the game when I emulated it. But again, just some of the missions were just not fun, or they were just really difficult. I also found the tiered goal system, while it was very good, I found that trying to get sick goals were just ridiculously hard. I mean, there were times where I had to get at least like 1.5 million points in competitions for the sick ranking, whereas pro ranking would have been like 400,000 or something. And I mean, if you wanted to go for the sick goals, good on you, but to 100% the game getting all the sick goals, oh, good luck. It was truly difficult in parts. I do appreciate Neversoft having a go though and trying something different with this game, but I feel that the toning down of the arcadiness that made Tony Hawk games what they were, it was just really weird, very jarring. I think also by this point, when the game was released, a lot of people were tired of Tony Hawk because they became yearly releases at some point. It's not that Activision has ever done that again since then, but I feel like probably launching the game with the PS3, with the hardware where the development was a bit tricky and there were lots of issues trying to optimize the game as best as possible. I probably feel like that Project 8 probably should have been released maybe a year or two later, and I feel like had that happened, then I think the game would have probably been more well received over time. As developing games for the PS3 got better, or about a year or two into its development cycle. It was the weakest of the mainline games that I played on here, but I think it still had some pretty good things about it. Introducing Nail the Trick, that was great. Despite the learning curve, it took me probably half an hour to figure out how to do it. Playing it for the first times, that was a bit tricky, but once you figured it out, it was excellent. Areas like high school in the open world, I felt they were very well designed. And I did say in the video that I think the high school school map is probably one of the best school levels. The open world overall, in my opinion, I felt like was very underrated. Really liked it, and I really enjoyed especially the gradual unlocking of alternate paths, connecting as you progress. For example, when you do the mission at the high school, the experiment goes wrong and you blow up a wall, and then the school connects to the slums, and that's kind of your first time entering the slums. And then from the slums, you can head into the city center, which then connects to the capital, the main street. It was great. The way everything interconnected was just terrific. I really liked that. I think it was a very underappreciated part of the game that I feel like a lot of people probably took for granted. But I think at the time, yeah, Project 8 did that very, very well. I appreciate Neversoft's ambition for that one. Number 6, Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. And again, like I mentioned at the start of the video, being ranked lower compared to the other games, it doesn't mean it was bad. I did not play a single bad Tony Hawk's game during my retrospectives. They were all great in their own ways. But American Wasteland, while ambitious, it was weaker than the others, but again, better than Project 8. But like I said, it had a lot of ambition as well. The whole punk shtick and the sunny LA vibe I felt was really cool, and the soundtrack kind of complementing it with some West Coast punk bands and hardcore bands and some covers from famous LA bands. I thought that was pretty cool. Characters like Iggy, Mindy, and Iggy's Stooges, if you know, you know. They were funny at times as well, and they were great characters, very well voiced. The voice actors who played Mindy and Iggy, I thought were actually pretty good performances. The parkour mechanics in Wasteland that were introduced were quite forgettable. The BMX controls, I know some of you like the BMX controls, a lot of you hate them as well from what you've told me in the comments, but these mechanics, while, again, I'm using the word ambitious a lot here, they were quite underwhelming, and I felt like, especially with the BMX, using the right joystick to do tricks, it worked most of the time, but a lot of the times it didn't really work, and it was kind of awkward, and BMX wasn't really a thing that I really wanted to go back to. I kind of only did it when I had to do missions. I mean, it's like if I played, say, Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX and I used a skateboard. I'd play Matt Hoffman for BMX, you know what I mean? I really appreciated how they had Tony Alva in the game, and from my understanding, he's basically like one of the OG skaters from like the 70s, which is pretty amazing, and having all the flatland tricks and all the kind of pioneering things he did as well in the game, I felt it was a really nice touch, and I felt like skateboarding and its impact on California it was quite a fitting tribute in the game, and I really appreciate how Wasteland really leaned into that California vibe, kind of reminding players of the roots of skateboarding in California. I did have issues with the PS2 version of the game, and I figured out it was because of my emulator, graphical issues, gameplay problems, lots of things that came up. Thankfully, I already had Rethought on PC, so I played the story through there. Much better experience, it looked much nicer, and ran a lot better. So thankfully, I almost was going to skip American Wasteland, but thankfully Rethought saved it. So kudos, 10K Rising, the folks who manage that mod over there. Glad I was able to finish the Wasteland video and do a retrospective, which is my highest viewed one at the moment. I think just under 50,000 views as of now, which is, wow, absolutely blown the other retrospectives out of the water. I know that this game's loved by many who have watched my retrospectives, but I do appreciate what Neversoft did with the game. And again, I'm using the term ambition quite a lot, ambitious quite a lot in this video. But yeah, they were very ambitious with their sort of open world with the loading tunnels and the other mechanics like I mentioned. So yeah, thanks Neversoft for trying something different. Number 5. Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. Yeah, an absolute surprise. Playing it for the first time, I was quite surprised at how decent the game was, really. It was the final game from Neversoft. All of their ideas from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, their very first Tony Hawk game, all the way to Project 8, they were all here. From basically like the classic mode from the Pro Skater games that you can find in arcade machines, all the way to Nail the Trick, which was improved here. And also they brought in Nail the Grab and Nail the Manual as well. So kind of trying some new stuff and adding on to Nail the Trick. Yeah, it was a lot more responsive Nail the Trick in Proving Ground. Really liked it. To me, it was very poignant playing this one because again, this was also a first time play for me, like Project 8. And it kind of felt like a farewell, you know, to a truly revolutionary era in skateboarding games. Tony Hawk basically changed the arcade skateboarding landscape. I felt like Proving Ground was a great send-off for the series. I really wish the game got its flowers at the time of release. Playing it now nearly 20 years after it's released, yeah, really great game. Yeah, really liked it. The narrative was a bit jumbled and there's not really a story, but I do like that you could go down one of 3 paths in the game, or you could mix them up depending on your style as well. So you can have a bit of this, bit of that, or you can just do the missions for one particular style. So whatever your jam is in the game. I think like Project 8, if Project 8 was released, say, a year or two later, and then Proving Ground was was released, maybe a year or two after that, I feel like Proving Ground probably would have benefited a bit more. By 08, 09, development for the PS3 was pretty much solid. So I feel like Proving Ground could have been improved a lot in certain ways as well. You know, another skateboarding franchise that I've done retrospectives on, if you want to watch those, came into the scene, Skate, in 2007, so basically overshadowed Proving Ground. And I think by then a lot of people were kind of tired of the yearly releases. They wanted something a little bit different, so Skate provided that. But yeah, honestly, a huge surprise Proving Ground. I heard a lot of bad stuff about the game over the years, but playing it for the first time to do my retrospective, it's a good game. And if you don't have it, I would recommend sourcing it. Game's pretty cheap at the moment on eBay. I would recommend picking it up and giving it a go. Number 4, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. I didn't play this when it was released back in 2002, but I could imagine that the whole free roaming thing, no 2-minute timers during career mode, that would have been a revelation. And if you did experience that when the game was released, let me know in the comments. How did you feel when you realized that there was free roaming and there was no 2-minute timer? What was your reaction? Obviously, the levels were much bigger as well, lots more places to explore to make up for the free roaming as well. Obviously, it would be a bit difficult to fit a 2-minute timer into some of these levels. You wouldn't be able to see everything in one run. And despite all this, some of the goals, like the Kona slalom run and the Misty flip over the pool house also in Kona, that were just so difficult to do. Some of these missions were just incredibly hard. And again, just like Project 8, I just didn't bother trying to do them. I just did other goals. I've seen a lot of chatter online from Tony Hawk's fans saying that Pro Skater 4 is probably the hardest game in the series, and you know, I would probably agree with that. Compared to other games that I played, and mind you, for Underground and Wasteland and stuff, I did play on normal mode. But yeah, Pro Skater 4, yeah, a lot past just really difficult. And yeah, I would probably agree with that consensus. I know you can change stats to, you know, say reduce your speed to do the slalom run and stuff like that, but you know, you kind of want to play the game. You don't want to be messing around with stats. Rather just keep playing. Pro Skater 4, I appreciate, laid the foundations for what future Tony Hawk's games would do with semi and full open world structures. And this game is a true pioneer in that regard. And it's still a very solid game. Number 3, Tony Hawk's Underground 2. This game probably has, in my opinion, the best mechanics, the best toolkit in the series. Lots of refined mechanics, like the walking has improved a lot from Underground 1, but its dated Jackass-inspired story really brings it down. Has not aged well at all. I did mention in the retrospective, it is a true time capsule of that era. And yeah, like I said, it hasn't quite aged too well. I did also mention in the video that the soundtrack was probably one of the best, if not the best in the series, but upon further reflection, I would say it's one of the top soundtracks in the series, but Pro Skater 2 soundtrack is absolutely iconic. Pro Skater 3, which wink wink is coming up, that's pretty amazing as well. And Underground is coming up again as well. They're pretty awesome too. So upon reflection, it's definitely in the top tier of soundtracks, but it's not the best. Like I said in the video, it was far less personal than Underground in terms of story, and because of the Jackass inspired story, you know, with Bam Margera, lots of other characters from Jackass, Wee Man, Bill, a few others as well, the game was quite mean-spirited. Lots of pranks happened to people, NPCs. At the time, it would have been funny, but it just felt very mean-spirited. Underground was a lot more inspirational. Wasteland was also inspirational with the skate ranch and stuff, and you know, trying to build your way to being a top skater in California, building something from the ground up. Pretty lovely themes, but yeah, just Underground 2 was just very mean. The levels were okay, some funny Easter eggs here and there, but none of them are really iconic in my mind. And in all honesty, it probably should have been called Tony Hawk's World Destruction Tour or something like that. But I think around that time, an event happened in 2001 and there was lots of censorship about words like destruction, especially world destruction. So I can understand why they probably changed it to Underground 2, despite its very tenuous link with the first game. I feel like if the story was great or on the same level as Tony Hawk's Underground, yeah, this would be my top 2. Easily. But the story really brings it down. But overall, fun game if you can get past the juvenile story. It's pretty fun. Number 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. This is a classic, a truly groundbreaking game. The controls, terrific. The levels, iconic. The soundtrack, one of the best in the series. I mean, you can't really fault this game. It was truly a game that defined the early 2000s. A wonderful PS2 title. PS1 title had some things stripped from it, but apparently that was okay as well. And I feel like Pro Skater 3 really brought the franchise into the next generation. And I feel that in terms of the PS2 catalog entirely, I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 is probably an essential part. If you gave someone like 20 games to pick for the PS2, which would be considered essential, I think Pro Skater 3 would easily be in there. At least in the top 15, maybe even in the top 10. It really is iconic. It was absolutely fun to play. I hadn't played it for many years, playing it via emulation, the PS2 copy. It was fun. The controls were very responsive. The levels, like I said, truly iconic. The secret characters you unlock unlock as well, you know, like Wolverine, Darth Maul. Amazing, probably some of the best secret characters ever in the series. Obviously, due to licensing in these days, you probably won't see characters like that again in future titles. If you always wanted to skate around as Wolverine, you've got your chance playing this game. The gameplay is terrific, and like I was saying, it's an era-defining game. And I think it's going to be one of those games that will be played for many decades on, from people who may have discovered the game for the first time in the modern era, or grew up playing it, I think. It's going to be talked about for many years to come. A true classic in every sense of the word. Number 1, Tony Hawk's Underground. Tony Hawk's Underground pretty much took Tony Hawk's to a personal level. Very story-focused game. Of course, there were things like Crater Park and Crater Skater that came in, and also Crater Gold was introduced as well, but obviously the main crux, the main selling point of the game was story mode. The main crux of Tony Hawk's Underground was the story. The customization options were fantastic. You could really make your character the way you wanted it to. It was a very cohesive story of betrayal and triumph, a complete 180, so to speak, on Underground 2. Despite things that happen to your character, you overcome adversity and you triumph. It's very inspiring. It's kind of like a commentary on life, really. When things bring you down, you try different things to bring yourself back up, and sometimes you succeed, sometimes you might not. Yeah, there's just that sense of hope in Underground's story. It really resonated with me, honestly. And when it comes to Eric Sparrow, in my opinion, he is a top 10 villain in all of video games. An absolute menace. Beating him in New Orleans for the first time playing the game, which I played when the game was first released, but I never finished it. I finished the game just before I revamped my YouTube channel. I did complete Eric Sparrow's best line. I do have a video on my channel of that part if you wanted to watch it. Yeah, doing that, and also if you beat the game in subsequent playthroughs, you just punch Eric and you grab the Hawaii tape. You know, you don't have to go through the best line again. Absolutely satisfying every time, and yeah, it was great to go through the story. And some of the levels like Hawaii were just really fun, and yeah, lots of Easter eggs, discoveries. The fact that you could discover secret levels by finding cards in different maps, that was very cool. It kind of leaned into the whole exploration side of it. And having chapters in levels really added to the whole story element of it. Some weaknesses of the game, which didn't bring the game down overall. Driving and walking mechanics, they were pretty bad. Walking was improved in Underground 2, and thankfully driving was kind of a thing of the past by then. Again, Neversoft seemed to be one of those studios that just wanted to try different things to see what stuck, and the driving didn't stick too well, and they got rid of it in subsequent games. Appreciate trying it, but I wasn't in a hurry to jump into a car and drive around when I wanted to play skateboarding. Out of all the Tony Hawk's retrospectives I've done, Tony Hawk's Underground is my favorite out of all of them, and I feel like it's an essential part of a skateboarding game fan's collection. If not, just like Pro Skater 3, just a general video game collector, I think having Underground in your collection is essential. Bringing that whole story element into it, but making it a very personal story, and one where there's hope and there is triumph at the end, you know, overcoming the odds, beating your nemesis in Eric. Amazing. I love how they brought that into a series where it was all just mostly arcadey, it was all about the goals and stuff. Yeah, I really like how they had a go at it, and yeah, it paid off really well. That's why it's my favorite out of the retrospectives I've done. What do you think of this list? Do you agree or disagree? What's your favorite out of the ones that I did? Do you think I should have ranked Downhill Jam? And if so, where would you rank it? Thank you very much for watching. We're going to be leaving the Tony Hawk series just for a little bit, and I'll be back for the next video. We're going to be starting the Burnout retrospectives. We're going to start with the very first game in the series, which I've never played, so very excited about that. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos, and there are memberships on the channel. If you want to join, you get some perks, but of course, totally up to you. Thank you again. My name is One Hip, and you have a good one. Bye.